Welcome to Build Your People, the podcast where we talk about the construction industry's biggest HR issues. Today's episode tackles a topic that's urgent, personal, and too often overlooked: well-being in construction. This industry builds everything, but it's also the deadliest for suicide. And opioid addiction claims more construction workers than all workplace fatalities combined. We're sitting down with two leaders who are reshaping how we care for our teams, from the office to the job site. Rebekah Rafferty of DPR Construction and Hobbs, a workforce strategist and advocate, are here to show how their organizations are addressing mental health, addiction, burnout, and the culture of toughness that has cost us too many lives. If you've ever asked yourself, how can I show up better for my team? This conversation's for you. Let's jump in. Hi, Kathy. It's great to see you again.
You as well. I'm so excited to be talking about well-being in the construction industry today.
Yeah, same. It is a topic very important, and we honestly cannot talk about it enough because we haven't been talking about it enough, in my opinion. So with us today, we have two guests, folks that have been neck deep in this work around employee well-being for quite some time. So I wanted to take a moment to ask them to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Mac, first.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Honored to be here and talking about obviously a very important topic. My name's Mac Hobbs. I work for Revive. I'm Director of Business Development. I like to think of myself as a consultant. Background is in, really behavioral health, workplace performance. Revive is really focused on whole person care, which I'm sure we'll get into as well. But looking forward to our discussion today around behavioral health, mental health in construction.
Thanks for being here, Mac. Rebekah, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Hey, I'm Rebekah Rafferty. I am a marketing professional now with DPR Construction. We are a general contractor, and we try to focus a lot on our employee well-being. So I am really, really excited to be here today and to talk about this very important topic.
So, a lot of us know, but maybe not everybody knows, that the construction industry has the highest suicide rate of any sector out there. And opioid addiction continues to devastate our workforce. Mm-hmm. So what brought each of you, Mac or Rebekah, to this work, and why does this issue matter to you personally?
I'll start. Excuse me. I am obviously a male. And I think that, a lot of what we're talking about today and a lot of the issues that we're facing in the construction industry are predominantly, male issues. I got into behavioral health and mental health in really a volunteer activity, really running with homeless men, most of whom, just made some bad decisions around substance use and ended up, on the streets using, found homeless shelters. And I belonged to a group called Back on My Feet. We use running as a tool to create confidence and develop mentorship with men, and really got exposed at that point to the mental health issues that men experience quite a bit. When I became engaged with BHS, a Revive company that really focused on mental health, I immediately sort of attached myself to male-dominated populations, in that, I understood maybe what some of the issues facing these populations were, and really took it as, a point of interest and passion for me to really help these organizations in communicating well-being and tools and strategies that they can use to really help engage their member population into caring for themselves, right, and taking care of themselves. And so that's how I got engaged initially into this, and joined several safety council, regional safety councils around the construction industry, really helping to develop strategies and and resources to address what we're talking about today, which is men's well-being in construction. So
Thanks for that, Mac.
Rebekah?
Yeah, I kind of got involved because, well, personally, I've definitely struggled with a lot of mental health challenges since I was a kid for various reasons. And after going through years of therapy and working on myself, I found a ton of healing through that, through mental health support. So since then, over the last probably about 10 years, I've been getting plugged into different organizations and really just trying to raise awareness for mental health support and suicide prevention. That's kind of how I ended up in my previous role as a wellness coordinator on one of our mega projects. I started looking into the statistics with suicide in construction, and I realized that nobody was really talking about it. And I would have these one-on-one conversations, but nobody really seemed willing to talk about it in a group setting or, at our safety stand-down meetings. So I kind of just started talking about mental health stuff at our big safety meetings, and I started getting a lot of feedback from the employees and people wanting to hear more and to talk about it and opening up. And so I think I've just been trying to plug into spaces to talk about the things that maybe not everyone's comfortable talking about. And now I'm in a marketing role, but I'm still super involved with trainings and mental health support and really just trying to keep that awareness going now.
So, when we think about well-being, I know when I got into the HR space in construction about 13 years ago, I thought well-being was just your own well-being. And I went to several seminars and I realized that well-being encompassed not only your well-being, but social, financial, giving back to the community. And there were all these different tentacles to well-being that was kind of an eye-opener to me. I mean, of course, we want to take care of ourselves, but in doing that, there are other aspects of well-being. What does that look like to you in your professions, well-being in construction?
I personally think well-being is psychological, social, physical. It's all the thing. It's holistic, right? It's everything. And that's why it's so important to put measures in place to support all aspects of well-being, and really foster a healthier workplace. So, and that's for admin and craft. So, and Mac.
Well-being is it's comprehensive, right? It is holistic. It's all aspects of our life. It's not just the absence of illness, right? Which is, I think, a lot of what people think of. But even to expand on what you said, Kathy, it's the human well-being. It's also the workplace well-being. And I think that, as an organization, there's a business side and there's a human side, right? And for the well-being of the company, people need to be well. And I think for men specifically, I think we really need to expand this conversation and create greater awareness that well-being or wellness isn't just passive, right? It's not just our state, it is active. Every day we should be doing things to improve the quality of our life, right? It really is a consistent, active pursuit of optimal health and safety and life satisfaction. And I think the one thing with men in particular, and I'm very comfortable in saying this, but we're not help seekers, right? We don't go out and look for help, and we're also, as men, more likely to participate in behaviors that really put our health at risk, right? There's a lot of memes out there like, why do women live longer than men because of this, right? But I think maybe that could be a strategy that we really focus on today, is talking about what is well-being, right? And how can we get men specifically more engaged in that pursuit of help and pursuit of resources to make our life better, right? And I think if we can slowly but surely change these male-dominated populations in construction to be cultures of help seeking, we're going to see a huge difference, not only in overall mental well-being, but just overall well-being and organizational well-being as well, right? Which then opens us up to the opportunity of scenarios of expanding what our workforce looks like, right? And sustainability from a different perspective. So I love the topic of well-being and how you phrase that, Kathy. There's so much more to it than just like, how are we feeling today from a physical standpoint, right? It encompasses so much, and our organizations can really support all of that: career, financial, social, relational, as well as our mental and physical well-being.
And I would say, Jen, you have experienced working in the field. Years ago, the construction industry, the management was brimfire, and blah, blah, blah. The tables are turning. I'm seeing, Jen, share what you're seeing, but I'm seeing that the management style is becoming more boss to coach, and I'm seeing a little bit more empathy towards this whole well-being and holistic approach, which hopefully lends to your point, Mac, where men feel more comfortable to share and to be a little bit more vulnerable to holistic well-being. Jen, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I completely agree. I think the nature of a traditional construction site where you are hard bidding work and you've got deadlines and liquidated damages just makes for a terrible place.
Stress.
So much stress. Like, it makes sense. So construction companies that are leaning into integrated project delivery and team health meetings and everything, and the idea that Rebekah was even a wellness, person on a job site is something that we never would have thought about 20 years ago when I joined the construction industry, right? So, but you're right. The idea that the construction industry is changing is happening, but there's still plenty of organizations that hard bid work that's the majority of the industry still, right? The majority of the industry, especially when you think about the people that we are trying to reach on this podcast, right? It is small businesses that are, not doing mega projects, that are doing integrated project delivery and lean construction and all the things that make a construction project safer for everybody. So, and Mac, when you mentioned asking for help shows vulnerability, and it shows that in an industry in which you got to be tough and are bottom line driven, often it's a weakness. So I'm wondering, Rebekah, at DPR, how are you changing the stigma of that? Because you're changing the stigma of asking for help, of showing vulnerability. And how are you doing that on a job site?
I believe a lot of ways. I think we are changing the whole conversation around mental health. We're integrating it into our safety culture. We obviously aim to reduce stigma and encourage open discussions around mental health. We've partnered with general contractors and unions, creating the CEO Advisory Council to really just discuss initiatives and industry-wide strategies. That includes, suicide prevention, mental health, all of that. We established a mental health employee resource group, and that is a platform fostering education, community support for mental well-being in many ways. We incorporate education into our safety meetings, and that is in the field, but also in the office. We're hosting events with guest speakers, trainings, participating in external events. We're really trying to include this in so many aspects that it becomes normal, right? Because that is the goal here, right? Reducing stigma is making it just as normal to talk about mental safety as it is physical safety. And so that's one thing we're really trying to do, is just start integrating it everywhere. And that way it doesn't feel so odd when you hear about it.
Mac, what are your thoughts on how to reach the worker where they are and give them the language to be able to share how they're feeling mentally, physically, and have the confidence to do so?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously every person is unique, right? And they respond to media and messages and discussions in different ways. I think building awareness is, as Rebekah said, is critical. And I love, that she comes from a marketing background and tells her story, right? Oftentimes hearing other folks' stories are a way to open ourselves up. But I think, and I hate to sort of generalize things, but, we are dealing with some gender stereotypes here, right? Man up, all of those things that we've heard throughout the years. If we're not going to be able to change sort of that culture and that language, what I think we really need to do is then optimize it, right? And what does it mean to man up? Like, man up and take care of yourself, right? And I think that we can work with language and create ways to communicate this to maybe, a population that needs to sort of put the equation together, right? Like, you take care of your car, right? Preventative medicine, so that it'll work every day and function properly, right? We need to do the same thing for ourselves. So, we've played around with a couple different campaigns, like Man Up, Take Care of Yourself, be a man and talk about your feelings, but those can only go so far. And you mentioned, Kathy, empathy, which I think is so funny, right? Our leaders, our managers in construction need to be compassionate and empathetic, right? But you could never use those words, I don't think, in training, right? You need to be more empathetic. What? I think that we need to sort of change the language to talk about health and well-being. And I think looking at maybe a little bit more broad, I think when men, especially, I think men in construction hear mental health, you and I have been in these meetings, Kathy, where you say, raise your hand and tell me what you think when I say mental health, and people raise their hand and say straitjacket. And it's like, okay, that's a little extreme, right? But that's what we're talking about with construction. We're talking about suicide all the time. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about substance misuse. Maybe, changing some of the ways that we communicate this and talk about more, about well-being. You need to take care of yourself. Leading cause of death for males, are across the board just lack of seeking help, right? And seeking treatment and seeking screenings. We need to change that, right? Suicide is absolutely a part of that. I think that's like number 8, but we also have heart disease and cancer and, a whole bunch of different things where they're all preventable to some degree, right? We just need to make sure that we're communicating in a way that resonates with men, but puts the emphasis on, you need to take care of yourself, right? It's active, right? You're an active person. You're in construction. Let's take an active approach to our own well-being, because it's gonna be better for us. And I think even taking it a step further up to leadership, yes, communication has changed dramatically over the years, but I think we need to get more serious in our discussions about well-being and how important it is from a business standpoint, right? It's really important for us as business leaders that you take care of yourself, right? for sustainability, for loyalty, for lack of turnover, for profitability, but also because we're human, right? And we want you to show up tomorrow, and we want you to have a great life. We want you to be successful here. We want to promote opportunities to you, right? But you can only do that if you're well, right? And so I think there's a world of opportunities where we can sort of change the communication. I love having safety meetings that focus on mental health. I love, bringing up, Suicide Prevention Month. That's great, for the month that we have it. But what about every other day of the year? We need to really put communication together that's more consistent, that engages men in wanting to seek what's best for them, right? And how do we do that? So there's a number of different ways that we can do it, but even just changing lexicon a little bit, I think can help a lot.
Rebekah, you mentioned the safety talks. Those toolbox talks are instrumental in getting right to the employees on the front lines. Would you agree? And is there a message that resonated the most in one of your toolbox talks at DPR?
I would say the toolbox talks are a huge tool. They get conversations going, especially when you can get people in small groups, crews, not just a toolbox talk for everybody on the job site, but if you can break out into your smaller groups, which is something that we like to do as well, it gives people more of a chance to connect without it being so awkward. And we use questions. And we also have been training our supervisors in this, right? And being able to deliver these messages, getting comfortable with these messages, because we are, just like Mac said, it's crucial for supervisors in general to be able to deliver these messages of promoting well-being and prevention, and being able to kind of lead by example. So I think who leads these toolbox talks is wildly important. I think that can make or break one, to be honest, because if you've ever heard somebody deliver a message that they don't believe in, immediately. So you do really want to be intentional, especially around topics like mental health support or suicide prevention, that who are delivering these messages really believe these messages. And I think for me, one of the most impactful toolbox talks that we delivered, which was like, we talked about awareness of resources for Suicide Prevention Month. And I shared my personal story. And while it is a male dominated industry, and so, we don't have as many women on site, we still were able to connect. I gave my personal story about when I attempted to take my life when I was 18, and we talked about it, shared, people came, and it actually turned into like a really emotional kind of event. And there was like people talking to each other afterwards for probably 30-40 minutes. And all of the trade partners, all of our crew leads, we just kind of let that happen. And everybody was able to kind of talk to each other and share the struggles maybe they had in their lives. And I spoke with a bunch of people, and it was this really big opportunity to connect and just do it safely. And some feedback that I got that we've been listening to is that a lot of people do have those experiences, and they really do need somebody to say it first, and then they feel comfortable and safe coming to you with those experiences as well. Like, so many people came and talked to me afterwards just to tell me their experiences, just because then they felt safe too. Because I laid it all out there, and so that was a really good experience, and just taught us a lot about how important it is for us as leaders to be vulnerable first, and just say, hey, it is okay. Actually, you get to see all this, and then we both get to be human. So I think that's, was a good one.
I wanted to tag on. First of all, thank you for sharing that. And I know, and I appreciate that. I do think it's so important for us to be like shameless truth tellers as leaders, and letting people see the human side of us. That's why I love to tell people whenever something crazy is happening in my life, so they realize that like I'm not put together all the time, right? And I do see a therapist every week, and I think everybody needs therapy. And it's a constant conversation in my house with my children and my daughter's like, I don't need it. I'm like, everyone needs it. Like, it is important. It's like going to the doctor, right? And it's some weeks I'm just talking to her about how amazing my life is. And some weeks there's a lot of stuff that I'm going through that we need to talk through. And I know that not every organization will have somebody who feels comfortable doing that, right? So I believe NAMI has volunteers who will come talk to your company about that, right? So it's probably not quite the same as having someone you work with open up about their mental health. But if you have no one, there are organizations out there that will come in for free. Like NAMI is a nonprofit that, and MCCI, we've partnered with them a couple years ago and did a whole webinar series around that. And they brought volunteers who so graciously shared their struggles and how it has affected their ability to work. And I think it's, we did talk about the ROI for business owners too, to make sure you do that, because yes, it is wonderful to say you care about your employees as human beings, and you hope that you do, but also just the bottom line of the thousands of dollars that one employee not showing up as their whole self, the near misses, the lost time, and then then all the mental health expenses that come along with it too. So it is very important. I applaud you, Rebekah, for doing that, for being that voice out there, and hope that other people will realize that they should be sharing. It's okay to tell the world that you're not okay, or maybe you are okay today, but you weren't at some point.
Absolutely. And you're totally spot on about the organizations, because we did the same thing and partnered with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention for years. And they would come on site, bring resources. Like, all of these organizations pretty much are just trying to create awareness and help people. So they will send people if you don't have anyone, because it is, you do have to have somebody who feels comfortable. Nobody should be forced to speak on something that they're not comfortable speaking on. But there are resources that will come and be present who are comfortable doing that. So that's a great idea.
I think a sidebar here, and it kind of leads to other questions. In the construction industry, particularly in the field, and I'm dealing with this with some of my clients right now, where they don't take time off. They have hours and hours accumulated of vacation time, and they're not taking time to recharge. And it's this constant grind of, we've got to meet the schedule, we got to meet the budget. At some point, what gives? We can't, as human beings, work 365 days a year and expect to be, on our A game 24/7. So that's kind of that tough it out. Mac, you were talking about that, be a man, tough it out. This is the industry. What are some strategies that in the construction industry that supervisors and the workers do to mitigate this? I mean, I see it more times than not that they have hours and hours of vacation time and they're not taking time for themselves.
I think this is strategy, and speaking to leaders specifically, I'm guessing those are the people that are probably going to be watching this podcast. Well-being needs to be taken very, very seriously. right? And as I've mentioned, it's all of those different attributes, right? And I know we're focused on mental well-being, but I sort of look at them as tires on a car, right? You could have three aspects of your well-being: mental, physical, and financial, maybe, that are really doing great, right? They're all inflated, they're perfect, but that one social or relational wheel, it isn't, right? And it's deflated. It's going to mess up the whole car, right? So you need to have balance across of all of these. And I think from a leadership perspective, yes, the project is important. Yes, the timelines are important, but from a sustainability standpoint, your people are going to be the most important always, right? From an investment and an asset standpoint. And if you burn out an employee and you lose them, that's tough, especially when they're a really, really good employee. So, I think that we need to sort of reframe and look at sustainability long term. We need to be addressing these things that are preventing our people from being their best, which is overwork, which is, we all hear about burnout. It's a pretty hot topic. I think it's all related to our work-life balance, if you will, and our purpose. But yeah, I think that, we need to talk about safety from a standpoint of, yes, we need to do our stretching and getting ready physically for our job every day. We also need to sort of check in mentally every day as individuals, and also then as teams. Like, how are you doing today, right now, so that you can work well? Well, I'm not doing well because I haven't had a day off in 6 months. Okay, well, that's something that we need to address, right? This is not sustainable. You do need to take time off. You do need to have that balance, or else you're not going to be a help to us, and in turn, it's not helping the business at all, right?
So what I'm hearing is advocate for yourself, but also on the manager side, there needs to be, at a higher level, when you're budgeting for the project and the timeline and the budget and the manpower for the project, you need to really be thinking about the well-being of your people at a higher level. And do we have enough people? Do we have that overlap for those that need to take those breaks for vacation and sick? And I'm in the camp that if you're given 4 weeks of vacation for the year, you better darn well use all 4 vacations for that year, because you need every bit of that to recharge. Jenn, I know you've worked in the construction out in the field, and you probably can agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I remember a Sean Acor book, Big Potential. He says you are more productive when you take time off, right? And honestly, it should be a huge red flag to any manager that they've got employees with banked vacation. Like, the idea of banked vacation, we've actually here at MCCI switched to unlimited PTO.
Mm-hmm.
You need time off if you're sick, if you want to go on vacation, you take that time, because I know you're going to get your work done. And honestly, having a certain amount of vacation that you have to take or have to use or whatever, like, nobody here struggles with taking their vacation, because I'm encouraging you to take time off and spend it with your family. We get one life, and we should not be spending it at work. We should be, right?
And Jennifer, you're right. That needs to be a leadership conversation, but oftentimes, yes, so that needs to change a little bit from a leadership perspective. But we've talked about middle management a couple of times. I can't emphasize how important management is across every industry, but especially with construction, right? Oftentimes we are promoting people because they do a really good job, right? But they're not a good manager. I think we need to reframe what a manager's role is, right? Yes, they are to oversee the project as a whole from a business standpoint, but part and parcel of that is the human element and the people that we have doing that, right? Part of the role of middle management or management in general is to manage the people, right? And if you're not identifying performance issues or mental health issues, more often than not show up in performance related issues, right? And they can be addressed when they're pea size. When they become bigger, is where we have more of an impact on the business. And so equipping managers, and a lot of insurance companies and insurance consultants out there can provide mental health awareness training for managers. But I would say in construction, especially, if you're not doing that for your managers, you're missing a great opportunity from a performance standpoint and overall success and sustainability for your organization. Those managers are going to see performance issues, right? And they're going to have the opportunity to address them and resolve a lot of what we see from a behavioral health or mental health standpoint in the construction industry. If we could just spend a little bit more time and energy in that area and creating, again, leadership skills that involve empathy and compassion. We can call them something else, but right, they need to be aware. They need to ask questions, right? Not, you're late, you're late again. Why are you late? Right? What is leading to this? You seem tired and fatigued. What is leading to this? Then we can address that, right? But those questions need to be asked from a human perspective, so that we can address them from a business perspective, right? And oftentimes, we say, 46% of the time people don't seek care because they're not, they don't know what that looks like to them, or they don't know about it. And, they've heard about it from HR, right? Kathy, you know this. They've heard about it over and over again, but there's no familiarity. Middle management becomes that opportunity. If we can familiarize them with all of the resources and opportunities and services that the organization is providing, then more often than not, we're going to be able to address those performance issues and mental health issues so that we're not talking about suicide in 5 years, right? We're talking about, gosh, these are the ways that we can best communicate or equip our managers to identify and connect people to the resources that are going to help them be better.
The number one of the top issues, performance issues, is attendance. And I love what you said, Mac, is training the managers to say, hey, listen, I've noticed the last 3 weeks, you've come in late on Mondays, you dip out early on Fridays, and here are the days. Help me understand what's going on. How can I support you? And then stop talking. And it's amazing what people tell you. And then it's, okay, how can we work together to help you through this? My wife is really sick. It could be anything. I just got a diagnosis that, I have a health condition, or, my son is acting up in school. It could be anything. And let's work through this. Rebekah, what are your thoughts on all of this? And
I mean, Mac did an excellent job of covering all that. I definitely agree with everything you said. I think that has to come from leadership first. I mean, we have a flat company, but we still need our leaders to be the ones to set that example. And very, very lucky that we do have leaders that set that example and encourage that behavior of take your time off. We do look at that, and we do keep eyes on who hasn't taken their time off. And we do have those conversations and say, what is the support that you're not getting to where you aren't able to, don't feel like you can take this time. But one thing that we do as a best practice is we all are kind of cross-trained in different ways. And that makes it, there's a reason for that. And it's so that we can step in when somebody is out. We are not scrambling, right? And so we are all trying to make sure we operate in this kind of cross-trained sense where we are able to easily plug in when somebody takes time off. That way there isn't this huge pressure for somebody to like, oh, I can't leave for 1 week because the whole job's going to fall apart. I mean, we are confident that that's not going to happen in any situation ever. And so I think that not every organization is run that way. But I think that could very much help if we thought about those things early on. That way there isn't that pressure, because sometimes a lot of it is just the pressure of the employee actually making the decision to not take PTO because they feel like something bad's going to happen, but just figuring out ways to address that. But yeah, absolutely. I think we observe our leaders and we say, are they taking time off? Are they answering emails the whole time they're on PTO? Are they doing it? Because if that's the expectation, then, you kind of tend to mirror that. So I do think that the message has to be demonstrated, not just said, but demonstrated. And then everyone else will kind of follow suit. But I mean, really, everything you said, Mac, was, I feel, spot on. Loved.
Yeah, what you just said, role models, I think, are incredibly important, right? Leaders as role models.
Don't send the emails at 8 o'clock at night if it's not the
Yeah.
building's on fire. They have
Yes.
this really cool function of Microsoft Outlook where you can click send at a certain date and time. I build them all up because I can work really early in the morning, sometimes late at night, and I'll set those for 8 a.m. the next day. I'm not sending unless it's an emergency, unless the building burning down.
Yeah. It's interesting. If anybody listening has paid attention to any of our other episodes, this theme keeps coming up of promoting transformational leaders, not just transactional. Folks that can help people figure out more than just how to get the job done, but how to, grow themselves as employees, as members of society, and that you look at that person and the company as like this holistic entity. And I think when you're talking about cross training and just like the business continuity plan of that, right? Like we had an episode on that, right? And the idea that one person, especially in a small business, it could happen, right? A small business, one person gone, things could fall apart. But tomorrow is not promised, right? So vacation or hit by a bus, right? Like either way, you don't want your job to fall apart. So the idea of everything is interconnected, and the way we run our business affects more than our bottom line. It affects the health and well-being of the people that work for us. And I find that really interesting.
And in that same comment, investing in the well-being of our employees is going to contribute to our bottom line, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's hard to sort of put those pieces together, but regardless of what size of an organization you are, providing benefits creates loyalty, right? Especially if they're valued and effective resources, right? You are building potentially a very loyal and dedicated employee who's going to be very productive, right? The flip side of that is if you don't invest and don't communicate and don't empower individuals to take care of their own well-being, it's going to bite you, right? In the form of turnover, in the form of poor performance, right? It is an investment. I think that more and more organizations realize that it is an investment, and we need to really, create the opportunity for our people to be better.
Yeah. And just to add on to that, I do think it's one thing I have trouble with is like our metrics for this stuff, they're fuzzy because what we're trying to do is actually prevent. And when you're trying to prevent, you don't have as many metrics, right? Because you're preventing a lot of things. So you do look at things like retention and then maybe employee surveys and then that type of stuff. But how many people are trying to work with you or all of that. But I think it's interesting to try to define what the metrics are and all of that in this, because it is prevention versus, it just looks different. So it's an interesting conversation, but yeah.
And that's a conversation, I think, that like the risk mitigation is a familiar conversation for the construction industry. That is the entire construction industry is on risk mitigation. And it's just expanding that, right, to include mental health. So we haven't touched at all about opioid use, right? And I think that, again, is also the reason why construction workers are disproportionately impacted by opioid use has to do with that bottom line, right? The insane deadlines, the lack of benefits that allow someone to go get the physical help that they need, and the self-medicating to still work in a tough industry. Like, so what are you seeing as best practices to like support both prevention, but also supporting those that are in recovery? That how do you recognize it? Like, what are the best practices we're seeing? Rebekah, is DPR doing anything around opioid use?
Yeah, our organization, we offer holistic benefits program that provides access to our employee assistance programs, crisis support, telehealth options. We provide therapy. So we try to do also physical health programs, right? Like we use a program called Hinge Health, and that is for physical health. If an employee has a strain or something like that, they have equipment they can take home, and they create programs for them specifically to work on physical therapy at home. But our focus is really healing injuries with physical therapy versus temporary fixes like painkillers, right? So to try to avoid that route entirely, we have athletic trainers who float to our different project sites.
Nice.
They teach ergonomics, assist with physical therapy when there are injuries. But we are also in the process of rolling out a Narcan program where we'll have Narcan available at our project sites, as well as the education and training. But we've already implemented this in the Southwest. We are just working on implementing this across the board. But a big thing that I think we've seen a lot of success with is having those athletic trainers. And again, that points back to prevention, because if we can get in there, teach about ergonomics, teach about stretching, talk about specific site work, like they'll go talk to our concrete workers and teach, hey, you're going to be doing this motion repetitively. Here are the ways to avoid a strain and all of that stuff. And that's definitely a best practice, obviously. But we are investing resources there to prevent a whole road of potential issues down the line. So yeah, we're trying to do a lot to address this in different ways.
Rebekah, you made some really good points there. As an HR strategic consultant in the construction space, I look at all of the functions of HR, and when I engage with a client, and one of the things I look at are, what are your benefits that you offer? Smaller companies typically have to kind of ramp up to all of the wonderful things that you mentioned, because it's a cost thing. And one of the things I encourage them to do is every year budget for one or two benefits that you can add to your portfolio. Maybe you have medical, dental, vision, and you don't have an EAP program. Or I love the athletic trainer idea and having them float. But it's important because our viewers sometimes, some of them are smaller businesses and growing, and need to find a way to get to the level of offerings that you're offering, which is fabulous. So budget for one or two well-being initiatives, benefit offerings, so that you can really take care of your employees holistically.
Yeah, and great point, Kathy. And this is a bit of self-promotion. I apologize in advance, but I think it's an incredible solution. So ideally, right, what every construction company or every construction work site would like to have is a 24-hour clinic, right, staffed with a mental health professional, a primary care physician, a physical therapist, an urgent care scenario. And it's just not economically feasible, right? And with the amount of different work sites, it would be impossible to have one at each work site. Revive is the premier virtual care clinic that we developed very specifically to provide all of those resources 24 hours, 7 days a week in a way that's affordable for organizations, right? No matter how big or how small. And they can include, core resources within our clinic, our primary care, urgent care, mental health, pharmacy. But then we also have specialty care resources. And for specifically manufacturing, construction, our virtual physical therapy has taken off, right? It's a great opportunity. A lot of what these guys are experiencing from a pain standpoint, the physical therapy in a lot of cases can be done virtually, right? And it provides them the opportunity of doing it when it's convenient and easy for them, right? So it creates a very easy level of care where I think men in general don't seek care because there's always a hurdle that they have to jump through, right? Or it's timing, or it's, oh my gosh, I need to go see a primary care physician this week. It's the only time I have, but they're telling me that it's 6 months out, right? It is the difficulty in accessing care that sometimes prevents us guys from doing what we need to do. And so, again, sorry for the self-promotion, but I think it's so appropriate that we're talking about it, right? Let's make access to care super affordable and super easy for our employees. Opioids is a heartbreaking topic, right? Super addictive. So we're talking about, men and their propensity, especially in construction, right? You could look at alcohol abuse and other, substance misuse as much as you can opioids, but it's just much more severe, I think, when we talk about opioids. But, it starts with pain. So let's figure out a way to create opportunities for managing pain other than opioids.
Catch
Right?
it before it becomes bigger. It's interesting. I know someone who wanted to check themselves into a 30-day treatment program for alcohol, and insurance, it just wouldn't, there wasn't a bed and they couldn't do it. And that was really heartbreaking, that, to hear that the medical industry was preventing that from happening. So what you're saying, Mac, is, and Rebekah, that if we have these mechanisms in place, and EAP, all these preventative care safety talks that are aligned with well-being, that hopefully we can prevent a more significant issue down the line for opioid, addiction or alcoholism or what have you.
The construction industry, 25% of the construction industry self-identifies as neurodiverse, which I think is a very low number. So like that ADHD, autism, whatever, I think it's actually low, because you think the majority of the construction industry is, Gen X or older. So they have a smaller percentage of diagnoses of those things. So I think it's probably a lot higher. And those people, neurodiverse people, have a higher rate of addiction. And I think a lot of it too, when you talk about the idea of the other roadblocks you hit, if you're a neurodiverse person, you're going to hit a roadblock that's preventing you. I have ADHD, right? If I hit a barrier in anything, it stops what I'm doing, and now I'm doing something else. And the idea of going back and trying to find a therapist that takes my insurance.
Yes.
Trying to find a doctor that has a time that's not like it is this barrier after barrier after barrier. And I think these options, like what Revive has, and I know there are other organizations that do very similar work, really helps. But also just potentially like a case manager that you can have on staff that would just help you find the correct resource. Because I didn't get a therapist until I had somebody help me find a therapist, and I wasn't, suicidal. Imagine if I was and I couldn't find somebody.
Yeah.
It is the state
The
of
crisis moment is, I mean, somebody in crisis, Lord, they don't need to be calling and scrambling. It should be readily available. And that's where companies having an EAP what I used to do when I worked as a director in the general contracting space, I would ask everyone to pull out their phone and put this 800 number in your phone for the EAP. And at the time we had VHS, Mac, put it in your phone because you never know when you're going to need it. And when you're in crisis, you just push this number and it'll take you to where you need to be.
Yeah. And again, the idea behind Revive, and I think I made a comment earlier, 46% of people don't access care because they don't know about it. They don't know what's there. It's more in my reference, it's more that they're not familiar with it, right? They don't know what the experience is going to look like. They don't know what to ask. So whenever you're looking for resources for your organization, I think it's imperative to look at what the experience is, right? How that resource is positioned. We like to say, of Revive and BHS, which is our EAP, standalone EAP side, is that regardless of what your issue is, you can call us, right? And we can talk about it. Right. And so the idea of a care clinic and Revive as it's a sort of a comprehensive grouping of these different resources is you can come in not knowing what your issue is, but we can still help you. Right. So in the case of looking for a therapist or doing an assessment to figure out what truly your needs are, and then guiding you through that process like a case manager makes it really easy for a guy. Right? I don't need to know what I'm dealing with or what my issue is, but if I can have a sort of front door, right, or a single entry point to anything that's impacting me, and know that they're going to take care of me, I think, wow, what a resource, right? That sort of takes all the guesswork out. You don't need to figure out which of my benefits is going to support me. You just call, right? And I think that case management piece, right, creates an awareness or a familiarity where I don't need to know exactly what my problem is. I don't know whether I need a coach, a doctor, or a therapist, right? And I can utilize the same service for everything.
That's great.
I love
It's a
that.
cool concept.
Very cool. Very cool.
Jen, I'm dying to ask the question about the what myth about mental health or wellness in construction that we need to bust or get rid of. Rebekah, you're smiling. What's there? What myth is out there about mental health and wellness that we need to just squash?
I mean, I think we've already talked about it a little bit, but I think the biggest myth to me is the myth that people can leave their personal lives at the door, because the truth is work is a huge part of your life, but then you have a whole other side of the coin, and it's impossible for us to kind of shut off a part of ourselves and just decide to operate in this totally focused, zoned in way that where I'm going to go ahead and forget that my mom just got diagnosed with something, or, that's not real life. Right. And I think I've heard that a lot in different jobs. And I hear people say that sometimes. And I think that's a really wild expectation to be put on anyone. So I think we really need to normalize that people can't shut off their emotions and they can't always focus if they're dealing with a crisis or a mental health challenge, and that it's completely okay to ask for help about that. And it's okay to be who you are at work. And that hopefully we can learn to adjust to that. And just like we've mentioned before, Mac, the way you were saying is kind of when you do have a situation when somebody shows up to work and they're acting scatterbrained, their behavior is abnormal, they are late 3 times in a week and they're looking not well or something. You can ask them and say, hey, I noticed that your behaviors changed. Are you okay? And it's not the conversation of, I'm writing you up because you were late this many times and be better because I don't want to hear anything else. And so it's just kind of that readjusting our minds to the myth that people just walk into work as this, fresh, clean image. It's just not real. So that's a myth to me, and hope we
I
can
think
adjust
that progressive discipline where you have a verbal conversation or two, what's really going on? And certainly, allowing for that space to talk about it. And then there's the business owners probably watching this might say, well, at some point there's a business decision, and you have to kind of fall back on the performance and is it repetitive behavior, and is it impacting their performance and the ultimate, business components of what they're expected to do. So it's always, certainly opening that door, and it's always this fine line, at least from an HR perspective, that you're balancing, like, okay, how much is enough and how much is too much, and are they doing their job, and are they performing up to the expectations of the job description? So it's allowing for those conversations and looking for continual patterns, and then addressing that and hopefully meeting them where they are.
Yeah. And I think early on, because you're exactly right? Like you can't have for a long pattern of something with that.
Sure.
But I think if we're able to identify it early and just have that conversation initially, then connect to the resources needed, then it
Hopefully that
helps.
helps.
Yeah, it helps everybody. Usually
Yeah.
it does help everyone involved.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes back to other conversations we've had, like waiting once a year to do a performance review is just crazy. So it just, when you think if somebody has been an amazing employee for years and suddenly they're not, it's going to cost more money to try and find a new person to replace them than to help that one person through whatever they're going through and provide them the resources they need to get back to their healthy self. So regardless of the fact that you should care about that employee who's given all this time and energy to you and the relationship that you've created with them, regardless of that, like it is so expensive to onboard a new employee or even find a person for an industry that is struggling, especially that mid-level manager. That's where our gap is right now, right? We got plenty of new people that want to come in. I think we're kind of tackling that problem. We've got a whole bunch of people that are leaving, that are about to retire. How do we backfill them? And it is not by giving up on employees that are struggling with their mental, physical health at all.
Sure.
Amazing.
Any myth that you'd like to bust on this podcast?
Me? I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think just, from a very high level, and I think I started with this, is asking, even safety people whose responsibility is sort of mental health. When you ask what mental health means to them and they say a straitjacket, which is why I like to maybe change the lexicon a little bit. We all have health, right? We're all right. It's sort of our well-being is all of those components that we talked about earlier. We all have mental health. So when we think of that as sort of a bad word or, something that's way off here, we all have mental health, and we're all dealing with things throughout the course of the day that our well-being in general, right, comprehensively, can impact our behaviors, right? And that's when I think we start to talk about, what is a mental health or behavioral health issue, right? It's you still have that mental health. it's just not a mental health issue, right? When it becomes an issue and it's impacting our behaviors, that's when organizations and people, individuals, need to step up and say, I'm not my best, right? I'm making poor decisions because of these other things that are going on in my life. As you said, Rebekah, right? It's everything that impacts us. And I think that's the biggest, thing that's creating all of this stigma. We hear mental health, and we immediately think it's something bad. It's not, right? It's a component of us. We're all on a continuum. It's just a matter of what we're going through as an individual and day to day as to where we sort of are positioned on that continuum. So if we can think about wellness and well-being as more of like we're on this continuum and it changes every day, in all aspects of our well-being, and we just need to focus on how we can be our best in all of these areas and really be active and engaged in that. I think that it'll eliminate sort of that myth around mental health, right? And hopefully we're already eliminating, crazy and loony and words like that when referring to a coworker, right? And really look at what are they going through today, and how can I, maybe as a manager, or even how can I as a peer help that individual, right? So I loved what you said a little earlier, Rebekah. Like if we see someone struggling, yes, it is sort of the manager's role to jump in. But guess what? We can all as individuals, and I hope that every construction organization out there is developing a peer network of sort of well-being champions, right? To be out there and asking and encouraging coworkers to be better, right? And optimize the resources. But we need more than just a manager to jump in and say, "Hey, Mac, are you doing okay today?" Right? You seem distracted, right? Or you were late a couple times this week. Like, what's going on? Are you okay? We all should be asking, right? See something, say something, be humans and engage. And I think that if we can, really create that opportunity where it's okay to ask people how they're doing, and it's okay to respond in ways that could be a little bit difficult, I think we're gonna move the needle in this industry, right? So we just need to change how we're communicating it a little bit.
I love that. I think that's a great note to end on, changing culture and, the culture of care pledge that we all should be taking. I think it's the AGC that started that, but it is so important. The job site is not just where we build structures, it's where we build culture. And the most powerful thing we can construct together is a workforce that people feel safe, seen, and supported in. So I wanted to thank Rebekah and Mac for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great conversation.
Yeah, it was a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us that investing in well-being isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's suicide prevention, it's recovery support, and it's leadership, most importantly. So for our listeners, if you're ready to take the next step in your organization, start small, listen more, check in often, and never underestimate the power of showing your people that you truly care about them. And thanks for listening to Build Your People. Until next time, stay well and keep building.